This is Trial Transcripts Exposed by Crime in Court with Heather. Raw courtroom reads with my commentary. Let's dive in. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Crime in Court with Heather. This is the second trial of the Menendez Brothers case, and we are in the middle of the direct testimony of Erik Menendez. And we are starting the beginning of the day of Wednesday, December 13th, 1995. And just for your reference, cross examination begins at the end of December 14th. So we're starting at the very beginning of the 13th, and we have multiple parts to get to until we get to cross, but just wanted to give you a heads up to where we were in the timeline of things. So let's get started and continue right where we left off. So we left off obviously with the 12th. So now we're beginning December 13th, 1995, and the following proceedings were held in open court outside the presence of the jury. The court says the jury isn't here, but the defendants are here with their counsel. People are here. What is it that you want to discuss? Ms. Nahira says, Your Honor, yesterday the court expressed some concern about the testimony involving evidence that came in as to Lyle Menendez only, specifically the conversation with Marcy Eisenberg, and I believe yesterday the court mentioned that as to Erik Menendez, there was a question of whether or not it would be relevant, and thus it would be evidence that would be more appropriately put on by the defendant, Lyle Menendez. FYI, Marcy however you say it, Marcy Eisenberg is or was the assistant, the administrative assistant or personal assistant, whatever. I don't know her exact title, but she was the assistant to Jose Menendez at his company. So that's where she comes in. Ms. Nahira continues on. I asked Mr. Levin this morning if Erik Menendez was going to be called by the witness Lyle Menendez, and he told me no. Mr. Levin says, I didn't say that. Ms. Nahira says, I asked him who was going to put on the evidence, and he said it will be him. And I believe yesterday the court viewed this and saw there was a potential for a problem there, and I think that there still is. Mr. Levin says, remember, Mr. Levin is for Erik, Ms. Abramson and Mr. Levin are for Erik Menendez, and Mr. Gessler and Ms. My gosh, I'm blanking on the female's name who is his attorney, Lyle's attorney. Oh, this is going to drive me nuts. Hold on, I gotta look it up. All right. Now, I did a slideshow a while ago when we first started this because I couldn't even keep the name straight. So I wanted some kind of a tool to help us all remember who everybody was attorney-wise because there's so many of them. So Gil Garcetti is the actual prosecutor, the DA, but we never actually hear from him, but he is the DA on the case. So he's the Los Angeles district attorney who is choosing to prosecute the Menendez brothers. Then we have Carol Nahara, who is the deputy DA for the county of Los Angeles. And she's obviously with the prosecution. Also, we have Mr. Kahn with the prosecution and David Kahn, that is. Then we have for Lyle's team, Michael Judge. Again, we never hear from him. He must be like one of the lead attorneys that he's kind of just on paper, but he's not really he's not there prosecuting, but he is on file. He's on record, I should say, as an attorney for Lyle. And then we have Mr. Gessler, who Ms. Towery, I forgot her name. So Mr. Gessler and Ms. Terry Towery for Lyle. Then we have Ms. Abramson for Erik and Barry Levin for Lyle as well. And that's who Ms. Nahara was just talking about. Barry told me this, and he's like, I didn't tell you that. You're lying. And then here we have the judge, that is Stanley Weisberg, who presided over both the 1993 and the 1996 trials. All right, so back to it. Mr. Levin says, Your Honor, Erik Menendez is testifying in the trial of Lyle and Erik Menendez. This is a joint trial, and I see no bar to Erik Menendez testifying to those events that he saw and those events that he has personal knowledge of that have been introduced by the prosecution in the trial in their case in chief, specifically the conversation in the limo and the boots and shoe incident. The court says, well, the conversation we had when this first was brought up a couple of days ago related to why is it relevant to the case of Erik Menendez, and I still haven't heard why it is. Mr. Levin says, well, it's relevant to the trial of both Lyle and Erik Menendez, and this witness is testifying in that trial. Any issues brought in by the prosecution in their case in chief, which we have relevant evidence that rebuts, refutes, explains, exculpates, is relevant evidence. The court says, relevant to who? To what? You just said two different things. You said it's evidence offered. It's not offered as to your client. Mr. Levin says it is offered as to our client inferentially. It's offered in the trial. The prosecution, remember, Lyle can't testify because not that he can't, but they don't want to put Lyle on because they would have to really impeach him with all the things that he did when he had his girlfriend lie for him, or asked his girlfriend to lie, and asked his friend, Brian Eslaminia, to lie for him. So he definitely, do I have this? Oh, there it is. I thought it wasn't quite as big as it could be. Yeah, so Lyle asked two people that we know of to lie for him in the trial, and so the defense obviously doesn't want to put Lyle on because he would be very badly beat up by the prosecution. So they're trying to circumvent that and get all the evidence in through Erik, which is probably why Erik seems to be on the stand an extensive amount of time this time. I mean, he was on they both were on for a long time in the first trial, but they got to get everything in for the both of them through Erik, it seems. So a lot of it has to come in that way, but the state is trying to force them to to put Lyle on the stand by, complaining about this whole thing and saying, well, he's not the right person to do it, when they could, obviously, the state could not object to it, and they could easily allow it to come in, but no, they want to object. So whatever, that's where we're at right now and why we're arguing over it. So the court says, come on, that's not true. Just because it's offered in the trial doesn't mean it's offered on behalf of your client. Let's get to why it is relevant to your client. Mr. Levin says, I believe it is relevant to our client. I believe that it is, first of all, it is something that Erik Menendez was present during the conversation, so he is a witness. Whether a particular piece of evidence has to be relevant to a defendant's defense is, I don't think, sufficient analysis to determine the admissibility of evidence. Erik Menendez is a witness, and he's a witness to an event that occurred based on some evidence adduced at the trial by the prosecution. In this sense, I suppose if we wanted to be hyper-technical, we'd say he's being called as a witness on that issue to an event concerning Lyle Menendez, nothing more, nothing less. The court says, well, that's not being hyper-technical, that's what it is. Why is it hyper-technical? You've not yet said one reason why it would be relevant to your client's case other than he is a witness. He's been a witness to a lot of things that occurred that he hasn't testified about. Mr. Levin says, I understand, but I think when I say relevant to my client's case, I view the prosecution's theory in this state as that both the defendants operated in concert, that there is a conspiracy allegation. There's the record is replete with the prosecution's innuendos and inferences that Erik and Lyle Menendez acted in concert. For example, he's absolutely right. He brings up a great point. For example, the jury could infer that as Erik Menendez sat in the limousine next to Lyle Menendez, and if they believe Marcy Eisenberg's testimony, they inferentially are going to. This has something to do with in the limousine at the funeral and Marcy's testimony. They could inferentially are going to, even though the court admonished the jury with respect to a limiting instruction, they still are going to take that evidence in the context of the way that it was presented. And I think that the fact that we have a joint trial, that the lines are blurred when we're talking about conspiracy theories and these hosts of limiting instructions and where they may come in are somewhat blurred in terms of distinction with respect to the jury. That's one reason why I believe it inferentially should come in with respect to Erik Menendez. But I think more specifically on a legal basis, it comes into Lyle Menendez as Erik Menendez being a witness to an event that occurred in his presence and tends to refute and rebut that evidence with respect to that evidence as it came in to Lyle Menendez. He makes some really good points, and let's see the court try to get out of this one because they don't want to allow this in, apparently. It seems that the court isn't leaning towards allowing it in, even though it absolutely should come in. Court says nobody is disputing that. Nobody is disputing the latter half of what you said as to relevance. As to Lyle Menendez, the only issue is as to how it is brought out. And if it's brought out by counsel for Erik Menendez, I've analyzed it and thought of it because this is really a minor point that only bubbles to the surface when the lawyers bring it to my attention. But if it is brought out by counsel for Erik Menendez potentially, I suppose the scope of the cross-examination of Erik Menendez might be broader because of that. He is saying a whole lot of word salad right now. Than if it was brought out by counsel for the co-defendant, who's necessarily limited in the scope of the cross-examination of the scope of the direct exam. Ms. Abramson and Mr. Levin confer. Mr. Levin comes back and says, "Very well, Your Honor, I don't want to risk that." And so the court says, "I don't know if that's a realistic problem or not. I really have no way of analyzing that." Mr. Levin says, "I now am concerned about that as well. I think perhaps the better way to do it would be to have Mr. Gessler put on that limited piece of evidence. I just thought it would be less. I thought it would just be better for court consumption of time, that it would be just a 352. The court says, without the explanation, we'll spend more time on the explanation as to why you want to save time. Mr. Levin says, exactly. And the court says, let's get beyond that. Are we ready to proceed then? Mr. Levin says, Your Honor, there is one more issue with respect to the dangling DMV record issue. We left that sort of in limbo. I have undertaken legal research concerning DMV records. First of all, the exhibit that was offered was an exhibit that had been provided to the defense by the prosecution. It is a copy of Erik Menendez's Department of Motor Vehicles records, and under Evidence Code Section 1280, it is a public record to be distinguished from a business record. And under the law, as I understand it, there are different rules which apply to the instruction of public records. The court says, is there some authentication of the document? Mr. Levin says, we do not have a certified copy. However, it was through the efforts of law enforcement to get. I can't run a DMV record. I would have to have the court order Detective Zoller to turn over the original, which he ran. But I just can't envision the prosecution making us go through the process when they know that this is Erik Menendez's record and can verify it. If that's what you wish to do, if it comes down to a point of authentication and we have to call people from DMV unnecessarily, I suppose we will. But this is a situation where they know this is an authentic record, and I believe that the manner that it was utilized in the first trial, the way the court says, how was it authenticated in the first trial? By stipulation or what? No objection? Mr. Levin says, no one objected. It was just presented. The court says, all right, so I do know if the people are still objecting to it or not. I don't know if the people are still objecting to it or not. Mr. Khan says, well, we'll show it to Detective Zoller, and if there's no problem with it, perhaps we can stipulate to it. Mr. Levin says, could he look at it now? So did the prosecution lose it, or they're just not using it into evidence, the original? I'm confused why the original, I don't know. This is a lot of hullabaloo about a piece of paper that you could easily get the original or whatever. And you could also authenticate the fact that it's a copy of the original, so I don't know why we have to argue about it. The court says, why don't you give me the exhibit, see if he can look at it now? Does the DMV record indicate what happened in court after that citation was issued? No, Your Honor, says Mr. Levin. The court says, when was this citation issued according to the record? Mr. Levin says, I believe it was July 1989, July 7th, if my memory. The court says, there's no court date? Ms. Abramson chimes in and says, I think that court date came after he was in custody because I made a whole series of appearances with him. The court says it could have been scheduled long before that. Ms. Abramson says it might have been, but I think it went to warrant. I think it was a warrant at that point. It was a 40508. I think the record shows a September date for the issuance of a warrant. Mr. Levin says, I'll have to look. Ms. Towery says, it's 366. Ms. Abramson says, we do have a videotape, a narrative of the house. The court says, if we can hurry up here, we have the jury waiting. Mr. Khan says, after discussing it with Ms. Nahara, the problem with the record is that it's hard to interpret, It's hard to interpret exactly what is meant by this record. I think it would be better if we get somebody from DMV to explain the significance of the entry on the document seriously, rather than seeking the witness, or rather than asking the witness what he thinks the entry is. We would therefore decline to stipulate. So they just have to be difficult, it seems. Mr. Levin says the law does not require that a public record be authenticated by any agency. The existence of this record in its present form is legally sufficient for its introduction as evidence. There's no requirement in the law as to those documents under Evidence Code 1280 that constitute public records that they be authenticated. The court says, I guess somebody has to establish that this is a public record. Okay, so the court has to establish that this is a public record, this particular piece of paper. I haven't seen it, so I can't really comment on it. I really would like to get the jury out, and you can move on to some other matters, and you can get back to this and let me look at the DMV records. Ms. Abramson says, Your Honor, there's a 1969 case that says just that. People versus, the court says, I'll be glad to look at that, all that stuff. I just don't want to delay the start of the trial. It's already 9:22 and the jury's been in the jury room since 9. Just give it to me and I'll be glad to look at it. Very well, Your Honor, says Mr. Levin. The court says, let's get the jury out. So, lots of arguing there. And now the jury has entered the courtroom and the following proceedings were held. The court says, okay, the jury is in the jury box. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're ready to resume with the testimony of the defendant, Erik Menendez. You may continue your direct examination. Mr. Levin says, thank you, Your Honor. Erik returns to the stand and Mr. Levin starts. Mr. Menendez, testimony has been presented at the trial by the prosecution concerning the purchase of a camcorder. Do you recall that testimony? Yes. Do you recall the camcorder? Yes. Do you have personal knowledge with respect to the events that occurred concerning the purchase of that camcorder? I don't know what you mean. All right. Did someone give you that camcorder? Yes. And who gave it to you? My brother. Lyle Menendez gave you the camcorder. Lyle. Approximately when? 2 days before leaving for Kalamazoo. Did Lyle Menendez say anything to you when he gave you the camcorder? Yes. What did he say? He said that he had bought the camcorder. Mr. Khan says, objection, calls for hearsay, sustained. Mr. Levin says, Your Honor, I'm only strike that. The court says the answer stricken, whatever answer there was. Mr. Levin says, did you have an idea what you were doing or what you were going to do with that camcorder? Yes. What was it that you were going to do with that camcorder? I was going to bring it up to Kalamazoo so that my parents could film my tennis matches. Was it common for your family, for your mother and your father to film your tennis? We had been talking about getting a camcorder for a long time before Kalamazoo, and they were taking pictures because they had not gotten a video camera yet. We had been filming tennis from the time I remember starting tennis with the big VCRs at that point and the big cameras. Was this for any particular purpose that the filming of your tennis would take place? Yes, my dad would then play it on television and do it in slow motion to drill us and teach us on training. What does Jose even know about tennis? Can I just ask? Why does he think that he's the best tennis coach there is, and he's the one that knows how to train his kids and teach them what they need to do? When he's paying an exorbitant amount of money, I'm sure, on private tennis lessons. I don't understand what makes him the authority to say this is how you're supposed to tennis. You know, like I don't know how he knows tennis so perfectly that he is training them. But anywho, um, so now what did you do with the camcorder after Lyle Menendez gave it to you? I took it with me when I flew from Florida to Kalamazoo. Was this on the tournament that occurred in Kalamazoo, Michigan? Yes, I actually flew to Chicago first and met my mother there. Why were you going to Chicago? Was that just a stopover on the way? It was a stopover on the way over. And at some point in time, did you realize that you had forgot the camcorder at the airport? Yikes. Yes. Where were you when you realized that? I was in my Uncle Brian's home. Where does Uncle Brian live? Chicago. What did you do when you realized that you didn't have the camcorder? I asked if I could use the phone and began calling the airport to try and see if they could find it. I remember I had left it in the baggage department above my seat in the plane, and so I was calling to see if anyone had picked it up and put it on the lost and found. Did you receive any information about that they had found your camcorder at the airport? Yes. And what happened after you received that information? Did you tell your mother? I told my mother that there was a camcorder, and the camcorder was in the lost and found in the airport at O'Hare. He's lucky that nobody took it. Prior to telling your mother that the camcorder had been lost, had you told her that you had a camcorder? Not yet. From what I remember, it was the same night, and I wanted to bring it up when it wasn't late at night, and probably going to bring it up the next day. The fact I hadn't brought it up to her yet was why I wanted to make sure that they had it before I brought it up. What did you tell your mother? My brother had bought a camcorder in New York with Mark Heffernan so that Mark could use it with me. Objection, calls for hearsay. Court says, what's your response? Mr. Levin says, Your Honor, I'm not offering for the truth of the matter, just for Erik Menendez's state of mind as to how he reacted and what he did. Objection sustained. The answer stricken. Whatever. Based on anything, strike that. Did you go to the airport? Yes. Did you go alone? No. Who did you go with? My mother. What was your mother's demeanor on the way to the airport? She was unhappy that my brother had bought the camcorder in New York. And did you recover the camcorder in New York? Don't you mean in Chicago? Yes. Did your mother tell you why she was unhappy that Lyle Menendez had purchased the camcorder? Yes. What did she say? That it's hard to say what she said if I don't, huh? It's hard to say what she said if I don't say what I told her. Huh? I don't know. Objection calls for hearsay. Oh, he's trying to relay the conversation, but he can't. Court says, all right, as far as what the conversation was, the objection as to the entire conversation, is that your objection? Mr. Khan says, yes. Objection overruled. This is not being received for the truth of what was said, just the state of the mind of the witness. Mr. Levin says, thank you, Your Honor. What was it that you told your mother regarding the purchase of the camcorder? That my brother had bought it in New York with Mark Heffernan, and that she asked me how he bought it, and I said I assume he used her credit card, and that he bought it so that Mark and I could train in tennis, and so that I could film my matches in Kalamazoo, and she was upset with Lyle that he had not told her first that he was going to be buying the camcorder, and he had purchased it on my mom's visa. Did you actually know, or the manner in which Lyle Menendez paid for the camcorder? At the time, I was just guessing. Now, did you find the camcorder at the airport? Yes. And what did you do after you found the camcorder at the airport? Did you bring it back to? We went back home, and we brought it back home. Home meaning my Uncle Brian's home. We brought the camcorder back with us. Did your mother ever return the camcorder? No. Did she use the camcorder in filming your tennis matches on that tour? Yes. And did she remain angry concerning the purchase of the camcorder? She never discussed it with me again. Well, did she at some point in time discover that Lyle Menendez had not used her credit card? Yes. And strike that, I want to change the subject. Did you ever learn at some point in time that you had been disinherited by your father? Yes. And how was it that you learned this information? He told me. What was it that he told you as to the reason why you had been disinherited? He didn't go into a great detail, just that I was being more private than he desired in terms of tennis. I assumed it had to do with my ranking about 70 in California at the time. The relationship wasn't at its highest point at that time. Did he tell you that he was going to disinherit you, or that he, in fact, had disinherited you? He told me that I was out of the will. Had he uh, had the word disowned ever been used with respect to a conversation you had with your mother and father? Yes. And who used the word disowned? My mother and father. I think that they used it as a power uh, grab. Like they used it to control the brothers by saying, if you don't follow what I'm saying, then I'm going to disown you. I think it was one of those like ultimatum type things. Like, well, if you're going to do that, then I'm going to take you out of the will. I think they used it for power. So what was it that they told you with respect to disown? It was more my mother who told me, and how I learned the information, that because I was supposed to write out what I was doing every hour of my day and inform my dad about what was going on in my life in terms of every day and at the dinner table, I was not wanting to get into it, and I wouldn't want to discuss the tennis. He was frustrated and angry with me over that, and my mother told me that he might disown me. Had your father at some point in time, I'm referring to when you were about 17 and a half, was there a time when your father was becoming increasingly angry with respect to you following his instructions concerning tennis? Yes. Was there a tournament in Arizona at some point in time in your tennis career that stands out in your mind? Yes. And what tournament occurred in Arizona? The Fiesta Bowl. What year was that? December 88. Every December after Christmas, there was the Fiesta Bowl. Did you play in that tournament? Yes. Was your father present during that tournament? Yes. Was any or were any of your family members present during that tournament? My mother was there. I believe my Aunt Joan was there. I'm not sure if Aunt Pat was there. Did your father do anything physically to you? Objection vague and irrelevant. The court says it is vague. Mr. Levin says, was your father violent to you during that tour after I had lost? And was he brutal to you after you had lost? I don't know what you mean by brutal. When you say you had lost, was there any relationship between your father's violence and the fact that you had lost? Yes. Who did you lose to? Kid by the name of, I think it was Peterson or Patterson, someone who my father felt that I should have easily won. I had not followed his instructions during the match, and he was just all around disgusted with me for losing. Eh, just another day. My dad's mad at me because I didn't do what he wanted. Kind of. To me, that's how that sounded. Now, when you say you had not followed his instructions during this match, was your father present during this match? Of course, yes. And was he giving you instructions? Yes. Where was he when he was giving you instructions? Off the tennis court, on the side of the tennis court. And where were you? On the tennis court. Was he shouting instructions at you? No, he was using hand signals. Did your father and you have a set of hand signals? First of all, your parents allowed to give instructions to players? Were parents allowed to give instructions to players? Were they allowed during these tennis matches? Objection irrelevant. The court says, sustained. You have asked a question to start the line of inquiry regarding an act of violence. Mr. Levin says, I'm sorry. The court says, let's get to that. Mr. Levin says, what hand signal did your father give you? Objection irrelevant. The court says, sustained. Let's get to the point of this inquiry. Court does not want this all coming out for whatever reason. Or, I don't know, he's getting annoyed with the defense here. Did you disobey any instruction of your father? Yes. And did your father mention that to you later on? Yes. And was that the reason why he was violent? Part of the reason. What was the instruction that you refused to follow? Objection irrelevant. Sustained. Let's just get to the point. What happened after you refused to follow your father's instructions? I was in the hallway and right in the doorway of my mother's room, and he was coming out from the library. He grabbed me and he threw me in my room. Did you have your own room? Yes. And were you alone in your own room at the time that he threw you in there? Yes. Did he enter your room? Yes. Did he do something to you? He closed the door, said for me not to disobey him again on the tennis court. It was part of the reason I had lost, and told me to get down on my knees beside the bed. Why did you disobey your father? He wanted me to call a ball out that I didn't want to call out. Objection, non-responsive, and irrelevant. Sustained. The answer stricken. Mr. Levin says, what did your father do? He had me get down on my knees and unbuckle his pants. And what did he do? Pulled out his penis, and I had to give him an oral massage. How long did he stay in your room? About 40 minutes afterwards, he came back and lectured me. I was in the chair. Now, directly, or just before your father took you to your room, had you been playing tennis? Yes. I had just come back from my match. How long did the match last? An hour and a half, 2 hours. And when was the last time that you had eaten before your father came to the room? A few hours before that match, so I guess it would have been about 5 or 6 hours before. Were you supposed to go to dinner with anyone that evening? Yes. Who? My Aunt Joan, my mom, my father, and if my Aunt Pat was there, my Aunt Pat. Did you go to dinner? No. Where did you go? I stayed in my room. Why? My father didn't feel that I was in any condition to go out, to go down and eat, and generally, if I lost, I wouldn't be. I wouldn't go down and eat. What was your condition? I was very somber. I don't remember if I was crying. I was a little dazed. I was exhausted. Do you recall the testimony in this trial by Perry Berman concerning a dinner at your house? Yes. Do you recall when that took place? Yes. When did that take place? In June, before I left to nationals. Was that a different time than Perry Berman's testimony? He said it was many weeks before. Could it have been many weeks before? What do you mean? In other words, the Kalamazoo tour, when did that start? Kalamazoo tour or the Nationals? Well, the Nationals. I left for the hard courts on July 17th. When I said the Kalamazoo tour, I meant the tour that ends in Kalamazoo. You indicated there were three or two precursor matches to the Kalamazoo one. There's a set of 3 tournaments together. And the first one began on July 7th? No, I don't think it began until July 9th. But you remember leaving California July 7th. I remember leaving California the same day I got a ticket because we were rushing to leave, and I remember the police officer pulling me over and saying I didn't have time for the ticket, and he did it quickly, and the whole day was a rush. That was your previous testimony about the ticket you received for not having a driver's license? Yes. And when did you return to California? August 9th. So during July 7th and August 9th, where had you been? Just name the states. North California, Florida, Kentucky, Chicago, Michigan. Did your father do anything violent to you during July 7th and August 9th? Yes. Where did that occur? In Kentucky. Were you playing tennis at that time? I had just lost a match in Kentucky. Did you have your own room? Yes. Did your father have his own room? Yes. Was your mother at on this trip? Yes. But she stayed in the room with your father? Yes. Did you stay in your room alone? Yes. What happened in Louisville when your father was violent to you? Some type of things that happened at the Fiesta Bowl, or same type of things. I had lost to a kid who was seeded 7th, but who I had beat before, and I lost in 3 sets. And my father was extremely upset and threw me into my room and lectured me and had me get down on my knees and other things like that. With respect to the incident that occurred at your house where Perry Berman was present, do you recall going into the study as Perry Berman testified? Yes. Why was Perry Berman at your house? I don't remember. Did someone tell him to leave? My brother. Were you present when your brother told him to leave? My dad had asked Lyle to excuse Perry from the home, and Lyle did. I was generally there. Did this occur at the dinner table? I don't remember. Do you remember what happened? Did you go into the study? Yes. And who else was in the study? My father was in front of us. My mother was standing to our left. And do you have recollection of what happened in this study? Yes. What happened? My brother and I were sitting down. My father wanted to discuss different things, one of them being an accident that happened at Princeton in which Lyle took the blame for another kid who had objection calls for hearsay, says Mr. Khan. The court says, well, it's unclear as to whether or not the witness is relating the conversation or relating something from some other source. So, objection sustained. Anything relating to that conversation is stricken until you can establish a foundation as to what was actually said versus some other basis of his understanding of these events. Okay? I feel like the judge is being kind of strict. But what else is new? We knew this. Mr. Levin says, when Lyle Menendez was home during the summer of 1989, when you returned from the tour, what was his general demeanor? You mean in August when I returned home? Yes, I'm sorry. Mr. Khan says, objection, irrelevant, and vague. Mr. Levin says, I'm attempting to set a foundation, Your Honor. For what? Are you kidding me? You just told him to set a foundation for this. State of mind, says Mr. Levin. Whose state of mind? Erik Menendez during the last week. The court says, and what date are you talking about now? We're talking about August of 1989. The court says, okay, then this evidence will be received solely for the purpose of showing the state of mind of the witness, Erik Menendez. Mr. Levin says, when you returned in August of 1989, what was Lyle Menendez's demeanor? Getting ready to go to college, back to Princeton. My mother was going to join him there. He was up. That's not demeanor. I don't think he understood the question. Was he up in your okay, so up, like he was in an up, like a good mood, I guess. Was he, in your opinion, up because of anything that you knew about what his life in Princeton was going to be when he returned? Objection calls for speculation. Sustained. Was anything said in the room? Was anything said in the room between your father and Lyle Menendez in your presence that caused you to feel that Lyle Menendez was in the frame of mind that you previously described? In the room that Perry had described? Yes. Yes. What was it? Objection calls for speculation, improper lay opinion. And the court says, what state of mind are you talking about? Are we going through this again? Mr. Levin says, talking about Erik Menendez's state of mind with respect to how he viewed Lyle Menendez during this period of time in August of 89. The court says, objection sustained on the grounds of relevancy. Guys, annoying. The judge is annoying me. Mr. Levin says, excuse me, Your Honor, may I consult with counsel for a minute? Sure. And he does. And then he says, was there a reason why you did not intentionally go to your brother for help based on your situation in August of 89? Several reasons. And what were those reasons? One of them had to do with a conversation I had had with my brother many years before. One of them had to do with the fact that I didn't want to burden Lyle with things uh, when things were picking up for him in his life. One of them had to do with the fact that this was humiliating for me. And I just wasn't real keen on telling anyone about it. I mean, most victims are not open to talking about it, especially at first. How were things picking up for Lyle Menendez? Objection, irrelevant. Sustained. Your Honor, I'd like to approach. The court says, you'd like to have a hearing on this matter? Yes. Let's move on to something else. I want to move forward and ask you some questions about your return from the police station following the interview that you had with Sergeant Edmonds, now August the 20th, 1989. The 21st. Mr. Levin says 21st, 89, past midnight. What time was it that you said that you believed you left the police station? Probably close to 2 a.m. And you had testified that you went home? went back to the Beverly Hills house, and you were not allowed entry. No. At some point in time, were you allowed entry into the house? To my house? Yes, to your house. Yeah, at some point I was. I'm not. We were allowed into certain portions of the house before they released the house completely. Before you were allowed entry into the house, were you allowed access to your car? Yes. Was your car within the police barrier tape or outside the police barrier tape? It was inside the barrier. Were there police officers on the grounds of Menendez property? Yes. And at some point in time, did you ask a police officer for permission to go to your car? I asked 3 times. The first time you asked to, the first time that you asked, do you remember about what time it was? It was after I had gotten back from the interview with Detective Edmonds and I asked to go get some. I think I asked if I could drive my car because I was going over to Mark Heffernan's. I had asked something about my car and they said they needed to search it first. Next time was early in the afternoon, 5:30 in the morning. We had gone back to the house because we knew that if they searched the car, it would pretty much be over at that point and we would be arrested. They denied us access at that point, saying they still had to search the car, and I think we went back to Mark's. I'm not sure. I think Mark was there. And then at 8 in the morning, we asked again, and this time they said yes. And what time was that? Close to, I only know from what the other detectives asked me, testified to, that it was around 8 a.m. It was light out in the morning. Yeah. And did you go to your car? Yes, the deputy didn't know I wasn't supposed to get in the car, and Lyle wasn't supposed to get in the car, and he just said yes. And we went and started putting things in duffel bags, and soon on. Now, you said that the deputy, are you talking about the Beverly Hills police officer? That's right, that's right. I meant the police officer. Do you know that this officer didn't know that you weren't supposed to go to your car? Well, I remember I had thought it was Detective Zoller. It might have been Detective Linehan, someone coming out while we were in the car saying, well, there's no point in searching it now. And so I learned later that they had just changed shifts and that the deputy didn't realize the car had not been searched and basically accidentally allowed us to get stuff out of the car. So there was a big faux pas there on the officers because they could have easily solved this case within the next day if they had searched Erik's car and not screwed up the chain of custody for it. So what, if anything, did you remove from your car? I removed some cartons, shell casings, boxes, some wrapping paper, I remember one particular shell in the front seat, underneath the seat, and many clothes to hide all that in the duffel bags. And you had already gotten rid of the shotguns? Yes. The boxes to the shotguns? Yes. And when you put these items into a bag, what did you do with the bag? I'm talking about at your car. Oh, we took the bag. I believe Mark Heffernan was there, and we put it in Mark Heffernan's car. I'm not sure whatever became of the bag. I'm sure I threw the other stuff out and didn't throw the clothes out, but I don't remember. So Mark Heffernan probably saw it in there and was like, what the hell is this? And threw it away, not realizing it was evidence to a crime, if he even looked at it, because there were shell casings in there. So if it was just a bag, he might have just tossed it. Or did Mark Heffernan know that they did it? Did he open this bag and see that they were dropping off evidence with him? And yet he still testifies very much in favor of the brothers because everything that he says, he corroborates the fact that he saw abuse take place on the courts and verbal abuse and mental abuse all the time, sometimes physical. So it's just made me think maybe Mark Heffernan knew that they were guilty, but still testified very much in favor of the brothers because he knew that they were being abused, perhaps. I think he did know. I really do think that he knew. I don't think that he maybe no one, I'm sure, ever knew how far the abuse ever went, but I think he knew that things were not sunshine and rainbows at the Menendez family home. Did the police ever search your car? I thought of it. To your knowledge? Um, yeah, he was still kind of drifting off in his thought about what happened to the bag. Did the police ever search your car, to your knowledge? Before I got there? No, they had not searched my car. Afterwards, from what I understand, they said that there was no point in searching the car now. Well, yeah, if they touched everything. Did they ever ask you what you took out of your car? No. Did they ever ask you if you took anything out of your car? No. Did they ever search your car in spite of the fact that you had been into it? I have no idea. At some point in time, did the police of Beverly Hills leave your property? Yes. And how much time or where was this relationship to you going into the car? Where was this in relationship to you going into the car? I believe it was many hours later, 3, 5 hours later. Were you then allowed to go into your house? They turned the house over to us. All of the police officers left. Did any police officer give you any instructions with respect to what it was that you were to do from that point on? No. What did you do at that point after the police left? I didn't know what to do. There was still finger powder on many of the doors, so they dusted for fingerprints. There was still blood in the room, in the den. I didn't know what to do at that point. I was sort of confused because suddenly the police had left the house. They had finished what they needed to do at the house, and Lyle and I were in the house, and we didn't know what to do at that point. How would you describe your emotional condition at this time? Very empty, a little lost, confused of what to do now. My parents were now dead and we were in the house. It was just, there were no instructions of what to do. At some point, I learned the relatives would be coming in the next few days, but I wasn't sure what was going to happen to my life or Lyle's life, and I just felt uncertain of the future. Were there any concerns that you had about anything that might be in that house? Yes. Were those concerns about any evidence that could link you to the shooting of your parents? No. Why didn't you have any concerns at that point concerning evidence that could link you to the shooting of your parents? Because the police had already been inside the house and they said they finished the investigation in terms of the actual property and had left. I didn't know of anything that could be inside the house that could link us. All of that was in the car and we had removed that. So I mean, I wasn't sure what was going to happen, whether we were going to be arrested soon, whether the police had any idea it was us or suspected us. We didn't know the answers to these questions. So, in terms of thinking that there were things in the house, that wasn't what I was concerned about. I was concerned about other things. Well, what were you concerned about? Just the different secrets that the family had that were very private that I wanted to make sure weren't exposed when the relatives came in the next few days. So, all the things that Jose did to him, he didn't want getting out. And now here we are. He has to testify for the second time in front of a bunch of strangers looking back at him. What secrets were you concerned about? What was happening between my father and I primarily. I was very anxious about that and what could be in my parents' bedroom about that. My mother's attempted self-unalivings and any other secrets that my parents were very private people, even from Lyle and I. So I didn't know that other ventures there, I didn't know what other ventures they were even into that they would want not public that I felt I should protect. So we thought that there were other things about his parents that may have been even worse, perhaps, or of the same caliber of awful, but different, more horrible things. I don't know. I don't know if you can get much worse than killing your son's, uh, not, I think decapitating, right? Decapitating his son's rabbit. It's pretty horrible to do to your kid. Let's see. Next question. Why at this point in time were you concerned about the fact that your father had been molesting you for 12 years? Why were you concerned about that getting out to your family? Because that was the last thing I wanted to get out. I would rather everything else get out before that. Well, why is that? The extreme shame that I felt from it, the fact that it was even happening. I felt it was a shameful thing. Did you go into your parents' bedroom? Yes. And did you look through their personal belongings? Mostly my father's. Did you find anything? Yes. And what was it that you found? A box of pornographic tapes. What did you do with those tapes? I took them from his closet. I put them in my room and got rid of them when there was time. I think I got my cousin Henry's help in that. There was also letters from my mother, different things in the house anything that we thought should be kept private. Is that when you found the tape recording device? Yes. This is when they find out for the first time that their parents were recording their phone calls. Now, at some point in time that morning, do you remember seeing Clara Wright on the 21st? I didn't remember it until she said that happened, and I kind of remember that happening. Who's Randy and Clara Wright? They're the father and mother of a tennis player, a very good tennis player who was on our school team and also played in the junior nationals. He was a year or two below me, but he was very good. Billy? Billy Wright. Did you ever play with Billy, tennis? Yes. Was Billy a social friend of yours? Well, the team traveled together in terms of from high school to the high school, and Randy Wright would be there, and I was friends with him socially. Yes, I had never been over to his house, but he was nice, a nice guy, and we were friends. Would you say the extent of your relationship with Billy Wright it was related to tennis? Yes. And during how long had you known Billy Wright and his parents, Randy and Clara? I had known Billy longer than I knew Randy. I knew Billy about 8 months. I knew Randy for about 6 months when I thought I was closer to Randy than I was to Billy. How did you refer to Randy Wright? What did you call him? Sometimes I called him Mr. Wright. He liked me to call him Randy. He was a very open, loud guy who was very friendly and very fatherly. How did you refer to Mrs. Wright? Mrs. Wright. Now, you said that you were close to Mr. Wright, that you were closer to Mr. Wright than their son. How would you describe your relationship with Mr. Randy Wright? Or to say over and over again, Mr. Randy Wright. It was good. It was a warm relationship. Many times it was just he and I rooting for his son to win and to win a match in a tournament at school, perhaps. And we would talk for a long time, and he was one that loved to give advice, and he was very open about what he knew in life. And he drove me to lunch one day, and we had lunch together. He was a warm, kind man, and Billy was a shy kid, and so was I. I knew more about Randy than I did about Billy. Did you have some personal property, specifically tennis rackets that belonged to the Wrights? Yes. How was it that you came to the possession of those tennis rackets? At Kalamazoo, Billy got injured, although he was one of the top seeds. He got injured early and had to leave. And some of his rackets were being strung or with the tennis mechanics at the time. Tennis mechanics? That's a thing? A tennis mechanic? And they fix your tennis rackets or something. So Billy's racket was being strung by the tennis mechanic. And so he, I guess, called up to Kalamazoo and asked if we could bring them back when I got back from Kalamazoo so that they didn't have to pick them up from my house. Do you recall a conversation with Clara Wright that occurred in front of your house on the 21st of August? Vaguely. What is it that you recall? I recall her wanting her son's rackets. I recall vaguely her asking what had happened, me saying that my dad had died, her feeling sorry, and telling me that anything I needed, if I needed comfort or care, to come over their house. And she was just very motherly, very sweet. What was your emotional condition at that time? I was in shock. I was dazed, unsure of so many things. Did you want to stay in your house? No. Had your relatives arrived yet? No. And where were your relatives? My Aunt Joan was in Arizona, Terry was in New Jersey, Brian was in Chicago, Marta was in Florida. They're all over the place. Did you have any relatives in California? I had a cousin, my father's first cousin, named Henry. Where did Henry live? He lived in Chatsworth. Where did the Wrights live in relationship to you? About a mile and a half inside Beverly Hills. Did you know that Randy Wright was a lawyer? Yeah, I knew he was a defense lawyer. Well, had you ever used him as an attorney for any reason? No. Did you ever use any attorney? Strike that. Had your father ever used Randy Wright as an attorney? No. I'm not sure how well Randy knew my father. Yeah, they did know each other because they met each other at tennis matches, but other than that, they didn't speak on the phone privately. Was there anything about the relationship that you had with Randy Wright up until August 21st, 1989, that was ever a legal relationship for any reason? No. Did you go to Randy Wright's house? I remember being there, yes. Now, do you have a clear remembrance of the events and the conversations that you had at Randy Wright's house that day? No. This happened August 21st, 1989? Right. But you do remember being at this house that day. I remember feeling nauseous in his bathroom. I remember sitting on the couch. He was there. Mrs. Wright was there. I remember watching the TV, being all over the news. I remember being away from the TV in the kitchen. I just remember they were taking care of me at the house. When was the very first time, Mr. Menendez, that you became aware that Randy Wright was a witness in this case? Several months after the first trial had ended. Oh, when did the first trial end? January of 94. When was the first time that you were made aware that Clara Wright was a witness in this case? At the same time. Objection irrelevant. Overruled. March or April of 1994? The witness says, or that's what the witness says. And then Mr. Levin says almost 5 years later? 5 years later, I guess. Yes. When was the very first time that you had been aware of the substance of what Randy Wright recalled of the conversation that had occurred 5 years earlier? When did I become aware of what he was saying happened on the 21st? In other words, when did you become aware of the substance, what it was that had Andy Wright had said about what occurred on the 21st of August? And then he says, you know what? Strike that. Did someone show you a statement of Randy Wright? I'm not sure if they showed me a statement or talked about it with Leslie on the phone. I don't remember. Somehow I was made known after the first trial what Randy was saying. Had you been asked to relate the substance of what occurred in the conversation with Randy Wright before you found out that he was going to be a witness in this case? No, I was never asked about that. Had you given it much thought? Not since the 21st. What is your remembrance and recollection today concerning the specific details of the conversation you had at Randy Wright's house? Very little. I don't remember even bringing the safe over to this house. I thought, yeah, right. I thought it had happened a different way. I don't remember my brother being at the house and just remember Mr. Wright and Mrs. Wright caring for me that day. Um, yeah, I mean he was in a very shocked state of being. Like he was completely shocked. So actually I do believe that he didn't remember bringing the safe over. Honestly, I do believe that he probably didn't remember that. I don't remember my brother being at the house, and I just remember Mr. Wright and Mrs. Wright caring for me that day. I had many discussions with them and talks, but I don't really remember what we discussed or what we talked about. Did you, in fact, or do you have a memory of staying at the Wright's house? I slept there. I remember the first night I slept there because I couldn't sleep. I had many nightmares, and I remember being in the bedroom. For what purpose did you sleep at the Wright's house? I didn't want to sleep at the Beverly Hills house. Do you remember anything about the safe? Yes. What do you remember about the safe? I remember it being in the garage of Randy Wright's house. I had thought we brought it over that day on the Wednesday before, but I specifically remember the locksmith fiddling with the safe, it being inside the garage, my Uncle Brian and my Uncle Carlos being there, my brother being there. Are you refuting or disputing that what Randy Wright testified to? No. Why not? Because Randy Wright is not a liar. Well, can you refute or dispute anything he says? I don't remember the conversation, so no, I don't. Well, do you know how good or bad Randy Wright's memory is? No, I don't. There was a safe in the family house? Yes. Did you know that there was a safe in there? Was there a discussion that you recall between yourself and Randy Wright about a safe? There must have been. He said there was. He said the safe got there. Objection calls for hearsay and speculation. The court says, well, it's unclear what you're referring to when are you referring to his testimony here in court? The witness says yes. Overruled. The witness continues. He said the safe was brought over that night, so it must have been. And he told us to bring over the safe where most probably either the new will or the old will be kept. And so we were supposed to bring it over and wait for the relatives to arrive. Did you know that there was a safe in the house before you went to Randy Wright's house? I know that there was a safe when I saw it when I was looking through the house and I was at my parents' bedroom and I found the recorder. I found the tapes in the boxes in my father's room. I must have seen the safe then. I don't specifically recall knowing about the safe before that day, but I knew before I went to Randy Wright's house. Did you go to Randy Wright's house for any reason that is connected to the safe? No. The safe was just brought up in the conversation at some point. When you saw the safe, who else was in the house? My brother. Had the police ever said anything to you about the safe? No. Had the police or any detectives said to you that they are going to or want to open the safe to see what's inside? No. Did they give you any instructions about what you would do with the safe? No. Did anyone know that you knew, to your knowledge, that there was a safe in the house? No. Did you ever attempt to destroy that safe? No. Did you ever attempt to conceal that safe? No. Did you ever attempt to gain entry or access into the safe in a private setting? No audible response, so I guess we don't know what he said. In other words, did you ever call someone to come to the house to assist you in opening the safe? No. Did you know how to get in the safe? No. Did you know, was it a combination safe? It was a dial safe or dial combination. It was an expensive safe. The court says, all right, let's take our recess and we'll resume at 25 minutes to the hour. Don't discuss the matter with anyone. Don't form any final opinions. And a recess is taken, and that's where we're going to call it for today. So I don't feel we got real far today. Again, I feel like we're just like getting slow little bits and dribbles here and there. We're not getting the whole thing, and it's part of it is probably because a lot of stuff is being objected to. They're saying, they're not they're making it a fight, the prosecution, by making so many objections and just, not wanting the defense to be able to put on a defense. And it just seems clear that there was obvious abuse going on in that house. And I think the prosecution is trying to did throw so much into this case to try to confuse and deflect from the real issues in the case. So that hence, the brothers have to be on the stand for a week at a time or however long to try to lay out their case. It's just frustrating and sad. It hurts me, like I'm hurt for Erik that he has to go through this a second time, sitting on the stand and doing this. And he doesn't have Leslie there this time, who was so wonderful with him. And now he's got a male attorney who really doesn't show that level of compassion and that like softer side. So it's just kind of boring and straight to the facts. And that's kind of where we're at right now. Like I said, we have a few more directs, but before we get to cross-examination, which I'm sure is going to be spicy, fiery. I'm sure it's going to be all the things. That's the point, that I don't want to have to listen, or I don't want to have to put Erik through again. I mean, I know it's the past and it already happened, but we're going to be reading through it in real time. So yeah, so there's that. So let me know what you guys think about this case, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks so much for reading along with me in Trial Transcripts Exposed. Till next time. Bye, guys. That's the end of this Trial Transcripts Exposed. Thanks for following along with me. Like if you want more, subscribe, and let me know what you think in the comments below. See you next time.